All right, welcome everyone to another podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We have another great episode for you. We have two great individuals coming out of Reno, Nevada, Alex Ficco and Wes Pittman. They are with Reno area home buyers. And Alex actually got started in 2018, and then the two of them got partnered up in 2019. They really focus on wholesaling and rehabbing. And guys, thank you so much for joining me, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having
Excellent.
us.
You got it. You got it. So, like I normally do, I always like to get started and say, how did you get started in real estate? Why did you decide to get into real estate? And yeah, just take us through that path. So maybe Alex, you can jump in, and then Wes, we can go into how you guys partnered up and met.
Sure. So yeah, I started on my own in, I guess, 2017. I did my first deal January 2018. I started out wholesaling, and why was, I guess I was delusional enough to think that I could do it after hearing about it on a podcast. And it was just something that, I guess that's how it's marketed anyway, is like how to get into real estate if you don't know anything and you have no money. So that was me. And yeah, I just started taking action and ended up doing a few deals on my own. And then during that time, that's when I met Wes. He was a project manager for a flipper in town. And so anytime that I would sell them a deal, I would do it through him. And then we partnered up in 2019. And I just got super lucky with my partner because at that time, it literally could have been anyone sitting in front of me, like, we should partner up. And I would have been
Yeah.
like, yeah, sure. Okay. And so it's just, we have some of the same skill sets, but a lot of kind of opposite skill sets too, which is like what's required for a good partnership. So it was just kind of like, hey, you can keep doing what you're doing as far as like finding deals. And then once we get them in contract, we can either wholesale them or we can flip them. And he had his real estate license at the time. So he was like, I'll sell them when we're done with the flip. So I was just like, okay. And that was early 2019, officially partnered up in June of 2019, and then been working together ever since.
Nice. That's awesome. And when you originally got started, like what were you doing at the time? Were you working another job that you just weren't happy with and wanted to do something on your own? What was that like urge to get you to do something different?
Yeah. So originally, at that time, I was working at the valet at one of the casinos here. And then I
Yeah.
was also doing music. I used to be a rapper. So I would,
Really?
and I have to tell people that
I did
within,
not know that. That's awesome to
yeah,
Look him up. He's got a
Interesting.
ton of followers.
yeah. So I have to tell people that with an asterisk all the time because I know how that sounds. Like everyone knows someone that's like, oh, I used to rap. But I was like touring and, millions of views, 30 million streams on Spotify. And so at that time when I was working at the valet, I was listening to like the Wholesaling Inc. podcast because that was like the only wholesale podcast back then. And, it had back then, I know they're on like thousands of episodes now, but there was like 130 episodes total. So each, they give you little nuggets every single episode, but it's like a
Hmm.
pitch for the coaching, which I couldn't
Yeah.
afford. So while I was parking cars, I would just listen to the podcast. I would put it in my pocket right here. And every time I'd hear something that I didn't know, I put it in the notes on my phone. So then at the end of all the episodes, I kind of had like the blueprint on how to do it. And then summer of 2017, that's when I quit my job. We toured all summer. And then when I came back, instead of going back to work, I just started like trying to wholesale.
That's super cool. Very cool.
It
All
was it
right.
was
And
it was a big part of why I partnered with Alex because so Alex was just like utterly committed. I had a very different background. Like I just studied music in college, but it was like classical music, and then I got a master's degree in urban planning, and I worked as a light rail planner on the Phoenix light rail system. It was like an engineer kind of type role, and then came back here to Reno and just decided that I didn't want to keep going the planning route and wanted to pivot. And I'd always been really interested in land development. And I realized more like, oh, maybe that's why I studied planning, was because I was really interested in land development. So I started thinking like, well, what's directionally correct to get me closer to that? And it's like, well, I can get my real estate license and start learning from there. Terrible agent to start out. Like I just had no background in sales, total background in engineering. So like being in front of a spreadsheet feels like very comfortable to me, but like
yeah.
calling people at that time was like the scariest thing ever. And I just didn't know how to deal with the rejection. And so like I really struggled with that. And that's when I got my job at Wedgwood. But and I was a project manager for them, and I flipped like 70 some odd houses for them while I was there. But when Alex and I started connecting, we went for coffee, and at that time he had a mullet because that was part of like his look for his rapper. He had this big like flowing mullet. And by the way, his rapper name, so people can look him up, is Fiki, Feeki. And then he's got his Insta and everything. I'm sure we'll
I'm
get all
definitely
that.
going to
Yeah.
be looking you up
You
afterwards.
should. His music's great. It
Yeah,
really
that's
is.
awesome.
And it's super like positive and inspirational and motivating. It's fantastic. But at any rate, when we met for coffee, I just could see like, wow, this is a dedicated person. He's got nobody telling him he's got to do anything for work. There's no structure imposed on him, and he's showing up every single day, like doing what's required to build his music brand. And then at the same time, he's doing what's required to learn wholesaling. So I just saw like that constance, like the ability to just keep marching and take like
Mhm.
constant progress. And that was one of the things that like, at the time I wouldn't have known this is like value alignment or like what I was looking for in a partner, but it was like a big virtue that I was looking for in a partner. And it was really, really important for our partnership because I knew that I was going to be a lot more reactive to the day to day of the business, and someone who could just like march. I was like, yeah, that's someone who I should be partnered with. That would help me out a lot.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's awesome. That's a great background, great story. So all right, so you guys joined forces, you teamed up, and then you said, okay, let's lay out, make some goals and objections of what we want to do. So you were getting into wholesaling, and you're now doing rehabbing as well, right? So how was that? What was that path? What did that look like? Was it just the two of you for a while, and then you started to expand internally to hire more people? Like, how did that growth happen? I'm sure it wasn't just overnight. Did you start to go into like direct to seller marketing? How did you get your leads, your deals? Can you take us through that path of like the original, between when you guys first got together and when you start to scale a little bit, how that happened?
sure. You want to take the marketing piece and I'll talk kind of about the operations
Sure.
component.
Yeah. I mean, when I was on my own, like I've always done direct to seller from the start as much as I could. Cause like at the beginning, I didn't have any money. So, I did like my first few deals off of like bandit signs or whatever, just like the cheapest marketing you could get. And then as I started closing more deals, I would just reinvest, some into the marketing spend back then. Um, and so that just kind of continued over, when we started partnering up. And then as we started closing some flips, this was back in when we started. I mean, we flipped our first house in 2019, but then, we did a lot during 2020, 2021. So that's when the market was going crazy, especially locally here. So we would get these big hits on each deal. Like we weren't doing that many deals. Maybe like one a month on average, maybe a little bit
It
more
was
than
about
that
that. We were
with,
doing like 20 a year,
yeah,
20 to 30.
yeah, something like that. And then, but we would get, on these flips that we would underwrite thinking that we were going to make like 35,000. By the time we were done, you end up making 50 or 60,000. So we were able to, really start spending on marketing with some of those big hits we were getting from the flips.
Great. That's
Yeah.
great.
And it was just us for like the first I guess it was like the first 6 months, but we actually hired an assistant pretty early on, a long-term friend of mine who was moving back to the area who was like down to be a guinea pig. And so he just was kind of just down to do whatever. And we had all sorts of little things that we could use some delegation and help with. And eventually I was kind of grooming him for more project management sort of stuff. And so he helped out a lot with the project management when we were like full tilt in rehab.
Okay. And how did it work out? Like, who was talking to the sellers? What were your like responsibilities in the beginning?
It was mostly sort of like, continue doing what we were already doing
Yeah.
before we were partnered up. So like I was talking to the sellers mostly, and then Wes was handling like all of the operations as far as flipping goes, and then listing the property when we were done with it. But this was also back like before we had any type of process. Like I didn't know anything about sales either, or like marketing or anything really. So it's looking back, like it's a lot different than how we do it now for sure.
Yeah.
What was that pivotal change when you guys started like scaling and you said, okay, we got to get a little bit more systematic with this to make sure that we're, running a little bit more efficiently. When did you kind of think about that, and how did you take action? Like, did you go to like somebody to help you out with systems? Did you learn internally?
Hmm.
I would say it's like a bit of both. And there's been a couple of like significant events where, things change or we learn something that really like moved the needle. But a lot of it was just like trial and error over time too. But I would say like for me, at least the two biggest changes, were both in I think 2022.
Mhm.
And the first one for me was like when we went to Ryan Pineda's event in Vegas for the first time. And that was the first time that I'd ever been around people that were doing as much or more than us, like in the same business, where it was just like roundtable format, just totally open, like what's working for you guys, what's not working, what problems are you having, that type of thing. And going to Pineda's office kind of made it real for me because they were doing, I think at the time, like 150 flips a year in Vegas. And like their operation was like, 12, 15 people. And I was like, oh, like we could definitely do this and like turn it into a real business. And so we learned a lot there too. And then later on that year, I went to Josh and Tiffany High's event in Ohio, and they're like the systems people. So we took a lot from them too, as far as like, we had already purchased like some real estate specific sales training at that point, but just seeing how they operate internally was super helpful too. And so our process now is not really like a direct model of anyone's because like, they Josh and Tiffany, for example, they only close over the phone and we basically only close in person. So the process
Mhm.
is obviously going to be different. But we've been able to like take from a lot of different people and kind of create our own process along with like, just figuring things out by chance and like, oh, that works, like add that to the process.
Yep. And when you started scaling, so you're learning all these systems, these processes, and are you scaling people first, or are you scaling your leads coming in first, or were you trying to do them both? Obviously, trying to do them both at the same time, but it's hard to do that with training people and whatnot. So, what was your path to like get to scaling? Because from the sounds of it, you guys scaled rather quickly, right? I mean, you guys got together, and then after 6 months, you said you started to learn on how to scale, and even today, you're doing, a lot more deals than you started with. So you guys scaled rather quickly. So how did you do that? What path did you go first? Did you start to scale the leads, or did you start to internally hire more people
It's so
first?
funny. It's so funny that you say that because I feel like we scaled so slow. Like, oh God, like it's just like such a snail pace. Like we need to go way faster. Like we could build this business way quicker. And always like it's easy to compare to other people and just assume that like it is going faster. But I appreciate you saying that because it is true. Like this year we're on track to probably do like 100. And I think that, next year it's possible that we could do 200, and that's kind of what we're shooting for. And that's what our goal is. We don't think that we'll hit TAM in our market until like 1,000. That's like our estimate is that we think there's probably
Wow.
some like 800 and 1,000, off market investor deals that happen in our market. So for us to have like 20% market share, we think is like reasonable. And so, yeah, but that's not answering your question. In terms of leads and people, I was going to say, I think we have typically scaled with people first. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's always like a balance
Yeah.
act.
Yeah.
It's like, and we don't really know what we're doing,
No.
and that's the thing too, and especially back then, like, we know more now, of course, than we did then. And
Right.
that's what it always feels like it's at a snail's pace. But when we first started hiring people, like our first acquisition manager, that was our first person that we kind of got right person, right seat,
Yeah.
and just doing acquisitions. And then that role had to get split into like appointment setter and acquisition manager,
Hmm.
closer. Um, and now that it's like very much more separate for all the roles and everything's well defined and like there's processes for everything and all that. But, back then it's always a balancing act on like, we have this amount of leads, but, I think that someone can do it better than I can because I'm not like a natural sales guy.
Hmm.
Uh, so we probably, thinking back, like didn't have like, oh, we're so overwhelmed with leads, like we need more people. It was just like people first, like Wes was saying. And then once he got trained up, we can pour more leads into the system.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, just about our market specifically. Like good quality leads are hard to come by. And I imagine a lot of investors feel that way in their market. And so I
Especially
don't
now.
I don't think we're a butterfly. I don't think we're special, but I do think it's very different than like the Midwest or the dirty South, where it's like you have a lot of absentee owners that are just like, I don't care, buy the house for me. I really could care less what happens with it. All of our leads are high distress. Like we have very few I would say for the most part, there's a few themes that we see very frequently, and there are very few deals that we can do if there's not like very, very strong motivators. And that means that your leads are going to be way more expensive because
Mhm.
it's just less leads in the market that will be willing to transact with you. And they're usually only going to respond to more expensive marketing channels. Like these are, you could, this is my experience. You know, we could probably do better on cold call and text, but we always found that the outbound channels was just like so much time and energy for just getting a bunch of junk leads, and then it was bogging down the
Yeah.
team trying
Yeah.
to process through all these junk leads in our market. So yeah, I think we usually picked people first, mainly because we had faith that someone who was dedicated solely to that role would earn their worth immediately
Mhm.
versus Alex and I being fractured between all the different roles that we're doing and trying to still kind of do that one at the same time.
Yeah.
More or less
Yeah.
that's been true. I would say that the initial 3 month period has been tough a lot of times. And then like by 6 months, we found those
Yep.
people to become more productive. And then it's a matter of like keeping them engaged, growing the company, selling the vision, so that you get some tenure out of them. But 100%, like once you actually have people that know what they're doing and they're doing a good job, yeah, they earn back, the cost of bringing them on 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree too. That's typically how I've scaled is always hiring first. And you know you're going to burn, right? You burn capital by hiring somebody first and they don't have as many leads, but you're also saving, you're going to burn time anyways if you have more leads that you can call back. Right? So if you can't get to them, you're still losing marketing dollars that you're spending on them, and you're not burning your time. And when you have other higher priority things to be doing. So,
The
I,
learning that baton pass though has been, one of our big lessons learned this year. Before we had the full leads for it, we decided to hire two acquisition managers, and we felt like they were ready, and we turned them loose pretty early, maybe like 2 months in or something like that. And I think we punted on hundreds of thousands of income through the summer. Like I think that there were so many appointments that were closable that we did not close that we were paying marketing dollars for because we just
yeah,
turned them loose a little bit too soon.
yeah,
It ended up working out that one of them ended up leaving anyway, just because like neither one of them was making the money that they wanted to make, and he just didn't. So lessons learned always with hiring. Hiring's
yeah,
tricky, but there's no way that you can really build an org if you don't, you know, bite the bullet and learn.
right. Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And so let's dive a little bit more into your, direct to seller marketing. Like, what did you said you started with direct to seller, your direct mail. I know that you did that beforehand, but what got you into what other avenues did you start off with, and how did that grow over time? Because Wes, we chatted, when was it, last week? And I know
And
you
so
guys are doing a lot of different marketing channels. So tell me about just like that growth of how that happened. If you can explain a little bit about that.
what do we start with?
I mean, personally, yeah, I started with just anything you could do for free. So like Craigslist ads, and like bandit
I
signs,
remember doing those.
pretty much
That was
free. Yeah, yeah.
Calling Fizbos.
Yeah, Fizbo, like, yeah, looking for deals on Craigslist. And because I had such little budget and no sales skills, like all I did to get my first deals was follow up with people. So I would just like relentlessly follow up with the leads that I did have. And then even like before we started working together, I started doing like some Google ads, but this was like the Google Lite version. I don't even know if they still have it, but it's like not the real ads manager account. It's like for dummies pretty much. You just like Google's like give us money and we'll do the ads, but it's not like Wes does it now for our account. And then we started working together. And then from there, and I was doing a little bit of mail before we started working together too.
Is that the Michael Coral thing?
No, this was just on my own too.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then but yeah, so I've done like, a little bit of a few different channels. And then like once we started working together and then had more of a budget, it's kind of the same channels. And we've experimented with a lot more things than just that too. But digital and mail are still like our biggest spend today for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say we got into PPC pretty early with an ads manager when we started working together on flips. And we also had an SEO guy who was like on a commission type structure for our SEO, and there wasn't much competition for it at that point, so we didn't really have to do a whole lot. And we texted a good bit in 2019. That's when Sherpa was out, and like texting was just texting was really good because there just wasn't like all the compliance laws and stuff like that. We didn't do a ton off texting, but we did a few deals off texting. And we never had success with cold callers at first until we actually hired an agency because we just had like no accountability. We didn't have scripts, we didn't have anything. So we tried that a little bit. But yeah, it kind of crystallized over time on focusing mainly on like warmer inbound channels. And so like at this point, like the majority of our marketing spend goes between, mail, which I guess is technically outbound, but the fact that you're waiting for them to respond feels like an inbound channel to me. And then quite a bit we do a number of different paper lead sources so that we're borrowing other people's landing pages. And then also quite a bit of SEO, PPC. We still run one caller. We do get some value out of having that, but I keep it super simple. Like you can, like with the texting and the calling, you can spend so much time trying to manage all those things, and it's just so much, and you just get so many different leads coming in that are just like whatever. So at this point, we kind of have a legacy caller that we get some deals from. It produces a decent ROAS, but it's not like a huge emphasis on it. I'm always like, I have my friends that will challenge me though, that work in this, that are just like, you're spending way too much money. You need to be a disruptor. You need to think about how do you disrupt this? And like, how do you like do a ton of marketing and a ton of touches for like lower costs? So I'm always like scratching, itching my head about how we get that, because that is one of the challenges I would say about direct to seller marketing or just paid marketing in general. It's definitely a hamster wheel. You have to keep feeding the machine, and you're always like dependent on like figuring out, you have to figure it out every month. It's like nothing ever works forever because it's just like constantly changing, and like your competitors are doing different things, and like the market's just changing. So you always have to be making an investment to get the advertising to perform. And then when it doesn't perform, I like flipping and wholesaling tend to be very cyclical, where you'll have like huge swings of like 1 month, you're like, dang, we made a lot of money. And then like the next 2 months, you're like, why are we losing money? This isn't fun. Let's go back to the making money. And so that aspect of the business can make it really, really difficult, I think, with the market, like having a high marketing spend in general. And so there's always effort that has to be put in terms of continuing to try to optimize it and make sure that you're still preserving your ROAS, because that is one of the challenges of like, a paid marketing direct to seller type model.
And that's one of the things that I really impressed me when we talked last week too, is your KPIs, your tracking, right, for the marketing. I can tell you there's so many investors that are doing this at a pretty high level that do not really spend the time or track as well as you guys do. So that's why when you guys scale, like, you can scale a business, but you can have internally, when you scale, you have tons of issues that can happen when you scale because you're not systemized. But what I see with you guys, you have really great KPIs. So can you talk a little bit about that, of how important those KPIs are to track, to understand how your marketing is performing, and knowing when that you need to make like a little bit of a switch? How often do you review those? And how helpful is it to make those kind of distinctions and when to shift?
Yeah. Yeah, I think we learned the importance of doing KPIs for marketing probably when we first went to Pineda's event, right? That was like one of the first times we really started thinking about that.
Yeah, I think we were tracking a little bit before that, but definitely not how we do now.
No. And then we started really getting into that. We hired Sharper. What's Sharper? Is it just called Sharper? I was like Sharper Business Solutions or something.
Yep.
Yeah, and they're pretty well affiliated with Pineda at this point. And Gary, who's the owner of Sharper, he's really he has a corporate background, and he's really into KPIs and reporting, and they have this whole framework now that's called like the REI's framework on how to build and scale businesses. And so we'd done some work with them, and they were the ones that got us started on doing a lot of like company level KPIs, and then like getting in some department KPIs. And so we started getting those so we could start keeping a pulse on the business. The marketing ones we started building out and fleshing out quite a bit more thereafter, just because at that point we had so much marketing spend that it was like critical that like we were paying attention to it and really understood what was going on. And yeah, I just have I just really like Excel. Unfortunately, like I just enjoy working in spreadsheets and trying to figure out ways that we can, understand all of that. And so basically our KPI sheet, we feed in every single deal that we do. If we contract anything, it goes in there. We keep track of what the projected profit is and then also what the actual profit is. Once it closes, we put in as much as we can in demographics and knowledge about what the lead source was and everything we can in there. So we have like basically it's called our deals done tab that we track in there. Then we have a few other tabs. One where we take our QuickBooks spend every single month and we pull in all of every single expense we've had for marketing. We have everything that we have classified for marketing. And then we summarize it on another tab by vendor. So we know for every single vendor and within every single channel that we're marketing to, how much we spent that month for that vendor. And then we take from our CRM all of our leads every single week and we put them in there. And the way that we classify a lead is not dead, not do not contact. So they have to actually have like they're, in PPC, I hear it called like a quotable lead, where it's like they have a property to sell and like they're in our market, And so if we get responses of take me off your list, those don't show up on our lead count. And so we'll track our leads every single week. And then we have basically created a number of like pivot tables that then summarize like, okay, this is how many leads we got, this is how much we spent, and this is how much our projected and actual profit is for, this marketing channel. And then we have it at different intervals. So we have like our current month analysis, which doesn't really have any of the marketing costs because we wait till the end of the month to put in all the marketing costs at like once the books have been reconciled. And then we have our prior month analysis, which is what we pay the most attention to for like, okay, like, how did things work on our tests, like our split test that we did last month. And then the 90 day is probably the one that I pay the most attention to. But yeah, we have the current month, 1 month, 90 day, 1 year, and then all time. And we can look back at all those different pivot tables by vendor. And then also we have it summarized by channel. So if we have multiple vendors within a channel, we also have like a version that's just like that channel. And so, yeah, it's an imperfect system, but overall, like it gets us enough information and data that I feel like we can then figure out like what we need to do next to make decisions and think through it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't tell you how many investors I talk to that just don't have that level of understanding on like what is working, what isn't, what their ROAS is, anything like that. So I really commend you guys for tracking all of that and using that to effectively, address what you need to do next to stay relevant and make sure that your marketing is working effectively. What have you seen? Because I know we were chatting a little bit on your marketing, but what trends have you seen like from 2 years ago to today? How is what's happened to your ROAS? Has it increased? Has it decreased? Yeah, if you can tell us a little bit about that trending, because I know today it's no surprise that deals are harder to find. So, how have you identified those trends and made sure, okay, this is not an internal, like us issue, it's like a systematic
Hmm.
thing that's happening?
Yeah, I would say overall, yeah, ROAS has gone down. And I've heard this from a number of different investors, rehabbers and also people that wholesale and things like that. I think that there's just more competition than there was prior. There's been more people that have been trying to enter the business. I think also a part of it is that there is not a whole lot of velocity in the market right now. During COVID, there was kind of like a sugar high where there was just so much velocity that, if you could get a deal, like you were going to do better than you thought you underwrote it
Yeah.
at. And so for us, and also we were flipping at that time, so our margins were a bit higher. And now we focused more on wholesale just so that we could just push more deals through the system and just keep a little bit of like a leaner operation in terms of our focus. And also like, when the market shifts and you're holding 4 million in debt that's personally guaranteed, you start thinking differently about things. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to go through the experience to then be like, do I really want to scale a flipping company? We have like
Right.
10% return on investment on like all these different deals, and all of a sudden 10% is what the market just moved. It's a
Yeah.
wild experience. So we focused on moving into wholesale because we felt like our competitive advantage was our sales and marketing. It wasn't, like how quickly we could rehab, how cheaply we could rehab or anything like that. And so at this point now, like the marketing and making sure that the marketing is returning efficiently is like one of the most important things that we can do. And so, yeah, we're always trying to toe the line between, growth, and trying to get more leads, but at the same time, also efficiency, trying to make sure that like we're optimizing for channels that actually perform well. And yeah, I would say overall the trend has been a decline in ROAS. And we haven't gotten worse. Like, there's no question about that. Like, we've only gotten better. So that it's up, I'm waiting for like an opportunity when the market improves, because I'm like, dang, we're gonna make a lot of money when that happens, because like we're way better at what we do now than we were then. But in terms of like the leads, we're always looking at channels, saying like which channels are performing well and why, and then which channels are not performing well. Can we reallocate spend and actually still continue to get a similar ROAS in this other channel that's working better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
I don't
And
know if I
then,
answered your question. I kind of got a
yeah,
little tangential
yeah,
there.
you absolutely did.
Okay.
Absolutely. What do you guys see for the future? For like over the next 12 months? Do you have kind of a thought of where the market's going to go? And what is your plan? Do you guys have kind of goals for the next 12 months for your company?
Yeah, I'll let Alex go first on the goals and stuff.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, as far as like, obviously real estate is like hyper localized, so every market is a bit different. We've seen a bit of a slowdown as far as like the retail market goes. So for that, like that means underwriting a little bit deeper than normal, just because the deals are like harder to move as far as wholesaling goes, selling them to other buyers. And they just want a better deal on stuff right now because it's like a little bit uncertain. And the deals that they do have listed are taking longer and longer to sell. So that's been like, an immediate change that we've had to implement. As far as goals go, we just want to keep doing more and more deals and keep building the team out. So like long-term goal is, yeah, to get to about 200 deals a year for like the flipping and wholesaling company. And then it would kind of, as far as like personnel goes, it's sort of like double of what we have right now.
What
Because
do you have right now?
right now we have, like I pretty much sit in the sales manager role. And then we have one BDR, which is like our appointment setter, one acquisition manager, one dispo manager. So we just hired a new BDR, and then our current BDR is going to replace me for sales manager. So to do
Well,
that amount of volume based on like our past data with, how many leads and how many appointments and how many contracts one team, I guess, can handle, we would need double
mhm.
the team. So we would need just the one sales manager, but two BDRs, two acquisition
Yeah.
managers, two dispo, and then, a marketing manager to replace a lot of what Wes is doing with the managing of the marketing day to day, and a COO to run kind of the day to day operations. So that's like the long term vision for the flipping and wholesaling company. And then we also have a brokerage too for like the retail side of things. So it's a good sister business to have because we pay so much for leads and we're able to monetize many more of those with listings. So sort of the same vision for that, just keep it as lean as possible, but just have like highly trained, highly competent people instead of like 5 million cold callers and, a bunch of acquisition agents that aren't like super, super good because you need that many people to handle all of those
Yeah.
leads. We kind of want to take that model with the brokerage too, instead of like the huge team model or the huge brokerage model where you just hire any agent that has a pulse and like hopefully they'll close something eventually and then the brokerage gets paid.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Where are you right now with how old is the brokerage? When did you open that up?
Well, it's only a few months. It hasn't been the biggest priority in terms
Yeah.
of growing it at this time. We just hired like one agent underneath me because we're getting all of the flippers to give us the deals back for brand presence. That was one of our main reasons that we wanted to open the brokerage, was that the thing that, direct to seller marketing is a huge way to like just like immediately put some gas in your business. But to really be able to like go the distance, you want to have brand in your market.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that I think that we've recognized, and how important it is, and how important it is to have free deals that augment, the paid marketing within our business. Because when we were flipping, we were able to do quite a few more of them. And I don't know if that was just because of the market conditions or we were seeking them, or just because being the buyer directly. I'm not sure, but we had a lot more like network deals, and those definitely helped the ROAS of the business and the overall profitability of the business quite a bit. So the thesis is that, if we're selling, all of the flip product properties, it'll be much easier for us to get more deals on the acquisition side too, because there'll be more of that association with, us
Yeah.
and flipped product. So
Yeah, I think honestly, I think that's a really smart move, not only for the branding side of it, but also for just recouping the monetary, just different ways to monetize a lead that's coming in, right? If somebody
sure.
wants to sell, doesn't matter what they want to sell it for. You can buy it as a, investment property, or you can list it for them and still monetize that lead. So I love that for the growth, especially at the volume you're projected to do, and even what you're doing now. You're gonna have spillover leads that might not want to sell at your price for an investment, but easily will sell it on the market with you guys.
Totally. Totally.
So that's
Yeah,
great.
it's a lot to figure out and build, but I think it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, we're coming up to the end. Any advice that you have for any new investors that are just starting out, or investors that are just starting to get into direct to seller marketing? Any advice that you would have for them?
I mean, I think that the best new advice for anyone that's new, like first and foremost, you have to pick your strategy. Like there's a million ways to skin the cat. And especially with all the hype around like creative and, with newer people listening to Bigger Pockets all the time, myself included back then, it's very easy to get shiny object syndrome and try to learn a little bit about everything, and you never are able to like get good at one thing. So just
Hmm.
pick one thing and then just learn about that and go all in there. You can always change the strategy later. And then like secondary to that is I run a meetup once a month here locally, so I talk to a ton of new people, and they just don't know what they don't know yet, and mostly like it's a volume problem, and they don't understand like the funnel of the business that is leads, appointments, offers, contracts, money. And like no matter how bad you are, or no matter how bad your leads are, if you pour enough of them into the top of the funnel, out comes a deal. But like we have the data to know exactly what our funnel looks like for the business as a whole, and then for each marketing channel too. But with new people, they don't have that data.
Hmm.
And so you just kind of have to swallow it. Like it's probably going to take like 10 or 100x of what you think it is, as far as like people you need to talk to, leads, appointments, offers you have to make, things like
Hmm.
that. I talked to a lot of new people that, like, if they were honest with me and if I asked them like how many offers did you make last month, like the answer would be zero. Or even how many appointments did you go on, the answer would be zero or one. And it's just like not reasonable to think that you're going to do a deal by taking your first appointment, making your first offer. You nailed it on your numbers, you were able to
Hmm.
find a buyer for a wholesale, and you were able to monetize that first contract. Like it's just going to take many, many more conversations, appointments, offers, contracts to get paid.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because, you can share your KPIs with people and they're like, okay, so that's what I'm gonna do to hit the numbers. No way, you're gonna have way more leads that you just don't even know how to talk to people. You don't know what a deal looks like. There's gonna be so many mistakes. When I got started, I mean, there were dozens of deals I probably lost just because I didn't know what to do with them. I didn't know the right questions to ask, how to comp out the property, how to analyze it, think of how to monetize it in different ways. So I lost so many deals. So that person back then versus today, I can convert way more deals just because I have the knowledge. But you got to pay for that knowledge in the beginning, and it's going to take a lot longer than you think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And like, I can tell people like on average, company wide, we close 1 out of 16 leads that comes into the system. But like, what's the composition of those leads? Like, if they're all PPC or like a good mix of mail and digital, even if they did have the same marketing spend that we have to get those same exact leads, like their conversion rate is going to be worse
Oh
because
yeah.
of the skill
Yeah.
set. And then usually when you're new, you're talking to lower quality leads. So it's like if we, with our current setup and 6 years of experience, can close 1 out of 16, like how many do you think it's going to take for you to close? It's like
Right.
1 out of 50, 1 out of 100. Like you just have to swallow that at first and
Yeah.
just like
It's hard.
realize you'll save yourself a lot of heartache and frustration if you just go in knowing like, all right, I'm going to have to take 100 appointments. Like that's all there is to it. And then I'll figure it out after that.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
that's a tough pill to swallow. That's a
Yeah,
lot
it
of work.
is.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Wes, anything to add?
What was the question again? I remember it was like
Any
someone
advice? Any
heard
advice that you have for
someone
like
who's
new
brand
new
new.
investors? Yep.
Yeah, or new to direct seller marketing. Yeah, if
Yep.
you're new to direct to seller marketing, I would say stay with one channel to start and learn it because it's kind of like the same thing. Like you have to pay your tuition because with most marketing channels, there is like a learning curve. And there's also like PPC. Like I've been working on PPC for, like better part of a year now, paid for coaching, a lot of it very expensive. I've been in the account multiple times per week, every single week. I've done all sorts of stuff in it. And my current ROAS is sitting at like 2. And it's like infuriating me. But it's funny. I was talking to my SEO guy, or no, I was talking to somebody else earlier today, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I've got another client. His is at 0.6." I was like, "Well, at least we're not just losing money on it right now." Um, because yeah, with a lot of those things, there is a huge learning curve to it. You have to put your time into it. And it is very, very difficult to become a master of a marketing channel because your competitors are using it too. And if they're more experienced, like they're going to do better than you. So if you try to do a lot of different marketing channels at once, you're going to get overwhelmed. You're also going to not be picking up the cues and learning how to use them better because you're going to be too spread thin between all the different things that you got going on. And so like you're probably going to waste more money and also not pick up the lessons that you're learning for. I think it's
Yeah.
it's better to like stay simple and then, once that seems to be working pretty well, yeah, I guess Hormozy always talks about it like his order of operations is like more, better, new. So like if you've got something that's working, can you do more of it and it still works? And then like if you can't do more of it, can you do it better? And then like if okay, you can't do more or better, well then I guess now you can look at something new. And I think with real estate, in our experience, we've needed to have more of a composition of different lead channels. Like there isn't just like one thing where we found like this like incredible niche where it was like, man, these Instagram ads just slay. We'll just do Instagram and nothing else. And maybe with like more of the businesses that he deals with, of like online marketing sort of stuff, like maybe that does work. But for us, we definitely have to have, for the size of our business, like a composition of a lot of different ways that we're acquiring leads. But it didn't start like that. It started off with like bandit signs. And, then it went to, adding some PPC. And so one at a time. I think that makes the most sense for it. And I do think that of the channels, I really do like mail a lot. That's been one of our, I'm not just saying this because like we're on your podcast. That's been one of my favorite channels over the years. I feel like overall we get really, really decent quality leads with it. And from the management component, it isn't that bad compared to a lot of other channels. A lot of other channels are a lot of work in terms of like the regular management of it. The mail, it's kind of like you need to do like the monthly reflection on like whatever you were testing. How did it actually work? Did we miss out on these deals because of me, or was it just like, whatever the case was? But, generally like the lead quality is pretty good. The one thing that I think you do have to spend a lot of time on is like make sure that your lists are good because that's one thing
Mm-hmm.
where, like you can get a lot of cost very quickly.
Yep.
If you're mailing people that are not the right fit. Like for when we first started, we were mailing like high equity. And in our market, that just is not a strong enough list for, sustained, good return on investment. Happened to be that the market was ripping and we were flipping everything. So like we were able to get away with that in spite of the fact that our list wasn't very good quality. But for sure,
Mm-hmm.
like now we could not get away with that at all.
Yeah,
There's
not at all.
no way. So yeah, start simple, focus on that thing because you're going to be busy enough with everything else in your business if you're doing acquisitions and you also are supposed to be the CFO and you're also supposed to be rehabbing your properties. Keep it simple. Like
Yep.
don't try to be doing multiple ones at once.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, guys, Alex, Wes, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Really excited to see where you guys go in the future. I know you're going to hit your goal. And yeah, thanks again for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Yeah,
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Take it easy, bud.
Okay. Thanks, guys.